Peace to the universal family. What's good? We're back another Monday, another episode of our mentorship and advocacy program. Every Monday, 4 o'clock, and Wednesdays, we're building the Women's Empowerment Network. So, this is our mentorship advocacy program 2023 Almanac, first almanac designed by yours truly. You can find it. You can find it if you want to find it on Amazon. Just search for Earth Say Love. You'll find my author page, or you can visit earthsaylove.com/mentorship. The description is underneath the video, and I'll add it to the chat as well. If you'd like to follow along, of course, in my program, I provide this for all my clients. So it's just something I wanted to, customize something, put it together for them, something special, instead of just, purchasing other resources. So we've got calendars, 52-week planner. We've got writing prompts, as well as an original 52 topic sequence that we're going over one at a time every Monday, as well as adult coloring. So it's very therapeutic. And we are now all the way in the month of May. We are in sequence number 20. We're in sequence number 20. So we're over here. Last Monday, we went over juvenile justice, and this Monday, we're extending that into discussing a little bit more about JDCs. So again, we do it, it's in order by letter. So if you took notes on this page, that's fine, or you want to flip to the back, we're over here. So as always, your assignment every week is definitely to go over your weekly planner, any appointments, schooling, things that you've got to get done, add that to your planner. You've also got your calendar, any of the coloring, and just watching the video, having the one-on-one discussion with me, but also taking notes, any answering the questions or noting any questions that you may have as well. And of course, I want your feedback. So that's the brief introduction. Let me get the light a little bit brighter. I apologize. There. So yeah, work in progress here on the tech side of things. So thank y'all for bearing with me. But again, this is the Mentorship and Advocacy Program Almanac we're working in. And last Monday, we discussed juvenile justice, and that ties right into JDCs. It ties right in. Let me just say peace to the chat real quick and add the link that's also in the description. So you can find more at earthsaylove.com/mentorship. And it's not a whole lot there, but you'll find the link in just the basic description. So here we are. Last Monday, we discussed a bit about juvenile justice, the definition of juvenile justice, juvenile delinquency, some of the key risk factors. So we went over all of that last Monday. If you need a recap, you can go back. It's still listed. Sometimes I archive them. So if you're in the program, you have all the links, but they may not all appear publicly. But that one's still public. That one's still up. So now we are in sequence 20 in our mentorship and advocacy program Almanac. And the topic, again, JDC is an extension of juvenile justice. So let's just get right into the topic. And if you're one of my clients, you're also welcome to. If you need to, you can text me. Please don't call while I'm live. I mean, if you do, I won't be able to take the call until I hop off. But you can certainly hop on the chat, or you could text me directly. And then, of course, we can get on the call. We can hop on a call after the live is over. So again, juvenile justice, we started that last week, the definition and so forth. And, just what that is, and the purpose of juvenile justice being to rehabilitate or prevent further acts of delinquency. And delinquency was seen more as like a petty crime, more so done by a minor. And we just discussed how that ties into really the responsibility falling back also on the parents and the adults to teach civilization to young people, so that they are civilized and really delinquency having to do with a lack of responsibility or lack of fulfilling one's duty. So we discussed our duty to be civilized, to be a person of our word, both for teachers, parents, mentors, and then of course for the youth themselves or ourselves, right? So JDCs. So again, we went into some of the risk factors. A lot of it, some of those factors included like poor educational quality, poor performance in school, socioeconomic factors. And the one thing I noticed that wasn't on the list that I really felt like it should have been on the list was mental health. And I think that just ties into a lot of what I see is lacking. And that's just a conclusion I came to later in life, just thinking about the whole system and how, it's just, of course, poverty and socioeconomic, yes, that's a key factor as well. But just and again, poverty and socioeconomic factors can affect mental health as well, malnourishment and lack of support and those things. But I really just came to the realization that it's more of like to me, I see it as more as a mental health issue, because if one is mentally healthy, then they're going to seek out healthier ways to solve their problems than, recidivism or committing a crime or so forth. So it's a societal issue, but again, I see it as also tied into mental health, which often isn't discussed as much on the forefront. So I just want to include that. And especially when I'm thinking about youth and minors, So let's segue from juvenile justice and get right into like the JDCs. So I listed it as JDCs, but really we're not, there may be some slight discrepancies or slight differences. There are juvenile detention centers. Then there are also juvenile correctional centers. I really was, when I wrote it down, I was really thinking more so correctional centers. I wasn't really thinking of the differentiation between one or the other. But as I was preparing for today's lecture, today's presentation, I was seeing like a detention center is more so like where they consider it like a hold. In my experience, it wasn't really like that. That's not how I saw it growing up. But a detention center is seen more like a temporary hold while that youth is awaiting court. They're awaiting adjudication either for sentencing, whether to be determined whether they're guilty or innocent, and also or if they've been sentenced and they're waiting for a placement. So there's the juvenile detention centers and then the juvenile correctional centers, and that is more so seen as correct, once they've been committed, once they've been sentenced and they've been committed to a placement. As I said, I'm going to have to do a lot more research really on this, because a lot of this is just more so from personal experience in my family, my peers, and then just as a professional, as an advocate, and as a mentor, just the work that I've done with youth as well. So, not so much on the administrative side or the legal side. So yeah, I'm gonna have to do more research, but in my experience, there really wasn't much of a difference. As a matter of fact, typically youth would be held at the same place, or youth would be held in a cell at an adult jail, depending on how long the hold was. They might just be held in a cell at an adult jail awaiting court. But if not at the adult jail, then oftentimes they were held right at the same juvenile correctional center where the youth were sentenced to. So I didn't really catch that there was a difference, like I said, until I started to do the research and was reading like these were different terminologies. So forgive me. It did also say that that often those terms are used interchangeably. So that makes sense. And maybe the idea is that they're used separately, but in practice, it's not really that cut and dry. So I think that's what I was running into with the research. So here, I may use them interchangeably, or if I need to differentiate, I'll do my best to make that clear. So essentially, I peeled some of my notes off the different, the Office of Juvenile Justice website, as well as the Annie Casey Foundation, that was doing research on juvenile justice. So some of the notes I took here: a juvenile detention center is essentially a place administered and operated by a department responsible for juvenile justice, where young people under the age of 18 years of age are detained while under the supervision of the department on a pre-sentence or sentence detention episode. So yeah, basically it's a hold. It's a hold, where they're being held waiting for court, or they're being held after they've gone through court, essentially. But again, doing the research, some of the stats were different, and I suppose that was why. In 2017, one of the stats I got: on any given night, there were 15,000 or more young people in any juvenile detention center. Another stat I found, so that's on any given night. In 2018, the total juveniles in a juvenile detention center or correctional facility, I've got the number over 37,529 to be exact, in 2018. So a little less than half of that, 15,000 on any given night, but a sum total of 38,000 in 2018. So it said the numbers were declining. I don't know where they're at. I'm gonna have to look for the most up to date and current and kind of really do more research. So a juvenile detention is supposed to be a short-term confinement before the court has determined that innocence or guilt, as I mentioned. And a juvenile is only supposed to be in there only when it's only deemed appropriate when the youth is considered a risk to committing crimes or fleeing, or they're waiting for that disposition or placement. I saw noted on the Annie Casey Foundation site, it said that this should never be routine, because of the negative effects and disparities that go along with incarcerating youth. I found that just so interesting. And as someone who came up in that system, again, I was never committed. My brother was committed when he was 12, and I was just a year behind him. But I was in and out of that system just to hold for court. Every now and again, they try to throw charges at me. But for the most part, they were all thrown out. But usually I was just on hold for the Department of Children and Families, like basically just for not having a home, just not having a placement, like a home placement. So I was, for dependency court, they would hold me in a juvenile detention center, which now I'm like going back and reading this, I'm like, it doesn't sound like that was right. You know what I mean? But that was normal to me. That was just what it was. So it seemed like that was what was normal for my peers that were thrown in the system. So I didn't know any different than that. Of course, looking back and, reading the guidelines, certain things might come to light, or I might see them a little bit differently. And even too, just the stats, like, that is a lot of youth, but I think I might have imagined it even being more than that, than that's in there, just because it was so normalized, being in there. So yeah, it says only if they're at risk to committing crimes or fleeing. So I found that interesting. Okay, and then they did note some of the negative effects and disparities. So some of those negative effects for being incarcerated in a detention center or correctional center as a youth would be deeper system involvement. So basically the concept being, once you're in the system, once you're in there already, it can begin to be a trap to keep you, like I said, normalized. It's normalized. If you're already there, you may be, kind of labeled like that's where you belong, because you've already crossed that threshold. So, and then for the youth too, once they're already in there, because it's normalized to them, It's like they may think it's normal to go back there or to be pipelined onto prison. It's just that association, where it's difficult once they're in there to somehow get them out of that system. So also exacerbated health issues, um, you know, for a number of reasons. Number one, the stress, the stress involved with being in that system, being separated from loved ones and family, and you know the food selection, the availability of um, the quality and availability of healthcare within that system. Of course, they're supposed to provide it, but they may not, they're not going to know the youth as well, like on a personal level. So they may not take the youth's complaints as seriously. If they're in pain or going through something, there's a number of youth there, and they may think that the youth is just trying to be problematic. They don't actually know that youth and what their health issues may be or any of that. So those things could be ignored. Like I said, the stress, just the lack of quality health care, the food, the lack of social support, all of those factors can contribute to the exacerbated health issues. Also derailed on their academic track. So if they're pulled out of school for a period of time, of course, they, by law, they do have to attend school while they're at that center, but the quality of education is not going to be the same. They're not going to be in their regular classrooms with their peers, their teachers. They're in a whole different setting, whole different track of what those classes entail. So that can certainly impact them once they leave and attempt to go back to school. So, and I don't have the stat here, but there's a very high rate that don't complete high school, who get into the juvenile justice system, which I also saw. Most of my peers did not graduate. Some of them did complete their GED. My brother did complete his GED. So that was common. It was rare. Some of them did graduate in there. Some of them did graduate with a high school diploma in the juvenile detention center, correctional center. Ours was just called the youth center. So it really, like I said, it kind of covered both detention and correctional. So yeah, so some did graduate, but all in all, it wasn't the same quality of education and certainly derailed them. And oh, another negative effect. They said it's unfair and costly. So by unfair, just they were I was reading, it was basically saying the disparity, whether it's, racial, socioeconomic, like more marginalized individuals is unfairly going to be incarcerated as minors. And then also with being costly. One stat I read, it said it's like about 70,000 per bed annual. So that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. That's a lot, and it just makes you wonder, why is it so expensive? But the facility, the people they employ, all the above. So you do the math, and that's a lot. That's a lot of money, and it makes you wonder whether there might be a better way to allocate those funds to keep the youth in the home, or some other program that wouldn't cost so much, right? So, and although it said that youth incarceration should never be routine, another status said 1/4 of those who commit delinquent acts does result in a detention hold. A few other stats. I saw one that said there were 625 JDCs in the United States, juvenile detention centers. However, there was another stat that read, where is it? Where did I note this? It was just over 1,500. Where did I note this? Oh, yeah. Just over 1,500 juvenile correctional facilities. So as you see, 625 out of 1,500 being a detention center. And then I'm presuming that's the total number, and that It's approximately 875 that are the actual correctional facilities, the more long-term facilities. Again, I may be missing a few numbers here, so my apologies. But that's what I read. Um, Another interesting fact that I read is that about 40% of them are private or corporate owned. So only about 60% are public, of that total number of the 1,500. And that just irked me, reading that, just thinking about, if it's a corporation, if it's not a public entity, then actually there are companies out there making money off the incarceration of youth. So that's a whole nother lane I need to research. Um, that's an interesting factor also in some of the foster care systems in different states, different jurisdictions. Some of it's public, some of it's privatized. So that's always just, that's something to really look into, is are there corporate interests or financial economic interests that are superseding actually the welfare and the well-being of the youth that are being served. So that's always a concern for me. It's always a red flag for me. I always want to look into that. As I mentioned, I was notating here, they use youth detention center and youth correctional center. Often those verbiage is used interchangeably, although there is that distinction I mentioned. And then the majority are not for violent crimes. The majority of holds are for nonviolent crimes, and as well as a high number that are not even for committing crimes, which I know this all too well. A lot of it is just for a probation violation. That's a common reason for youth to go to jail. And for me, that's very problematic, and it's a fact. They could miss school or be true, they could be truant or late to school. And if that violates their probation, the police can, something like that happened to me and my brother once. I don't recall exactly what happened, but maybe we were late going to school or something like that. And the police just came and picked us up, yeah. Anyways, I won't get all into that, but I have a memory of something like that. And whew, so yeah, the majority is for petty violations, nonviolent crimes. So that is also very highly problematic to me. I wrote a little bit about that in my book, my first book, which again, this is the second edition. It's actually, the first edition was really actually touched up. This is second edition. And now I've got the new cover, which I don't have with me yet. It's just enlarged. It's really the same art, but it's a little zoomed in. And yeah, that was one thing I really wrote about, was how it's problematic that some youth, if they get in trouble in the classroom, they can go to jail, so that it is very problematic. Okay, let me set that. Oh yeah, and if you want to look for this, that's also at earthsaylove.com. If you check the menu, you'll find Hip Hop and the Art of Peace Education. You'll find it there. It's also on Amazon if you check my author page. So if you're interested, I strive to, utilize my writing and all of that, my workbooks with my youth. So there's a workbook for that as well. Okay, so yeah, so let's get back to, I've already mentioned some of these, some of the negative effects. They miss a lot of school when they're locked up, exacerbated health issues, worse health that worsens their health. Also disproportionate punishment. And that kind of ties into what I'm saying about, they could get locked up just for being late to school or a minor probation violation if they're late home from curfew. If they are not able to get a ride to check in for probation, all those things can result in incarceration of youth. Lifetime consequences and future arrests. Again, that goes back to what I was saying about it just becoming normalized. Once that youth is introduced to that system, it even my brother, like, they labeled him a career criminal when he was like 12 or 13 years old. I mean, how are you going to label somebody, even if he had gotten arrested a number of times? How are you going to label a young person like that a career criminal? he hadn't even had a chance to grow to finish middle school, let alone high school, but yeah, so it's just very problematic once they're introduced to the system. There's a lot of stigma, labeling, and just once they're in there, it's just, again, they can keep getting sent back. That's why I say my brother was committed when he was 12 till he was 18, because he was put on probation for that until he was going to age out. So anytime he had a minor violation, he was on the run. If he skipped probation, he was on the run. They were going to pick him back up and bring him back. So very negative cycle. And you can see how that sort of cycle could affect a young person long term, because that's a huge phase of their growth and development, age adolescence till 18, so if incarceration is normalized at that age, if they're labeled at that age, it's going to be very difficult for them not to be pipelined into the adult system. So, and then two, once they've already been in the system for a while, sometimes they are bound over before they even turn 18. That happened to a number of my peers, where they were sent 16, 17, sent from the juvenile justice system to prison. So yeah, lifetime of consequences and future arrests. And then, as mentioned, the taxpayers are paying. The taxpayers are paying for this expensive system. And again, that isn't to say that we don't need to do something about, youth delinquency, but it really just makes you want to take a more critical view at the system and what could be improved upon. Where are the gaps? What isn't working? What better programming could be available? And even just looking at that number, like I said, that 70,000. I mean, I'd have to look to see what is the median income, for the average family. But I mean, I would think it's 70 or less, right? For the average family in the United States is and that money just all going to keep their youth in a juvenile detention center. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of them may be coming from a one-parent home, not all, but there's factors like that, like the socioeconomic factors. So, the parent may not be available or be able to afford childcare or all these different economic factors. And instead of allocating some of those resources to families to prevent the youth from being removed from the home, I mean, it's just, I see numbers like that. And I think that there's a huge problem with that money could be allocated to actually keeping the youth in the home with some better programming and support, wraparound support. My 2 cents. More research by Ursay Love on the way. Yeah, and then also that those numbers of 37,529 youth incarcerated in over the year of 2018. 73% of them were in public facilities, and 27% of those were private facilities. Again, 40% are private facilities, but as you said, 27% of those youth were in private facilities. So it looks like a higher percentage do make it to the public ones. But still, that's still over a quarter, almost a third in private facilities. So just something else to consider. As I mentioned, public interest, corporate interest, those factors we can't deny. We just got to look into them and see really what's being done for our youth. And are these public interests at play? Are the corporate interests at play? I always find those things important to research and see how we can improve upon that. It's personal to me. And then again, this and how this ties into trafficking. We already went over this really last Monday in terms of juvenile justice and just the high risk factors. If the youth is in a one-parent home, if there's socioeconomic issues, if they're running the streets, all of the things that would put them at risk to delinquent behavior would also put them at risk to being targeted for human trafficking. And, being in the system of care would put them at a higher risk to being on the run or running away again. So, the way that this system is set up now, it doesn't necessarily provide the best wraparound support to prevent trafficking amongst youth who are in the system of care. Again, that's why someone like me, I mentor. It's always important for me to visit my girls, no matter where they end up, whether they're in a hospital, juvenile detention center, correctional facility, foster home, in the home, independent living, wherever they're at. It's always important for me to keep that communication open and that support available, to do my best to fill that gap, to fill that need, to at least provide my understanding of the disparities in the situation, and strive to get them the resources that they all need and deserve. Yeah, so that is basically the overview on juvenile detention centers, juvenile correctional centers or facilities. And yeah, definitely a lot more research that I would like to personally do on this topic. I want to know, for my youth who have been in the system, what observations you have, what things worked better for you, what things didn't work as well for you. I noticed for me, I also was in 2 different states, so I noticed somewhat of a difference between the programming I was in one state and the other state, and just the whole feel and the vibe of it. So any observations, personal observations you may have had, things that worked well, things that did not work well, or if it's not in your personal experience, maybe any of your peers, family members, even anything you've read, seen on TV, in the movies, the news, anything of that nature. And if you have any solutions that you would offer, what you think youth need, of course, I've got my own philosophies, but I want to know from you, also what your thoughts and ideas are, how we could improve things. And then also as it pertains to trafficking and exploitation and risk factors, any of that, I want to hear your thoughts, your questions. And yeah, I think that's all I have for today, really. I think last Monday was a little bit more dynamic. It was a little bit longer. We did 40 minutes. I'll probably wrap this right up in a minute. Next Monday, I will still be hopping on. My schedule is going to be a little bit different, so I'm going to figure out how to work around that. I don't know whether I'm going to post early. We'll see what I do. But the topic next Monday, we're in sequence 21. We're in letter K, and we'll soon be getting into, of course, the month of June. I don't know why I did it this way. I think I should have put this page. Well, anyways, I should have probably put, it's all good. I don't know if I should have put that page first. Oh, no, I see why. Okay, I see why. So next Monday, the topic is kidnap. And then, so we're going into kidnap and kinship will be the next 2 sequences. So stay tuned for that. I've got a whole lot of information on that. And again, I just really do want your input. I know the main topic here is prevention of exploitation, but all these 52 topics in the sequence are topics that I've found all pertinent to human trafficking, prevention, education. So again, if you want to follow along and join us, the link is in the video description below. You can find it at urselove.com/mentorship. And also, if you want to follow me, if you do want to follow me online, all my links or most of my links are at the contact page on site. Certainly subscribe here, drop a comment, like the video. We appreciate the support as we continue to grow and build and develop this new resource for prevention education. And that's all for now. I thank y'all for being a part of this. And we'll strive to again hop on Wednesday. Thank you all for your patience. It's just been, the timing has been difficult for me, but I do have sisters that want to come on. And again, that we're just striving to get the technology all set up to have them hop on so we can have have them join us here and for the Women's Empowerment Network, and continue to live by our motto, I am power, I am power. So that's all I got for y'all this Monday. I'm going to leave y'all in the universal greetings of Assalamu alaikum and peace. Peace, family.